Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about Alaska. We've got a poll that shows Trump ahead by double digits. We'll take a look at that at the end. But first, ranked choice voting is used in Alaska. However, it looks like the requirements have been met to put repealing ranked choice voting on the ballot this November. There's been some signature gathering, and it's possible Alaska gets rid of this thing they implemented just a few years ago. Now let's talk about ranked choice voting and how we got here in Alaska. Here's the measure from 2020 that approved ranked choice voting. This replaced the state's partisan primaries with a top 4 nonpartisan blanket primary. So all the candidates, regardless of political party, appear on one primary ballot. Then the top 4 move on to the general election. Then in the general election, voters are able to pick who they want for their first choice, second choice, etc. If no candidate gets over 50% of the vote on the first round, then whoever's in last place is dropped, but the second choice votes are reallocated into the remaining candidates. And that goes on until there's somebody over 50%. It's been polarizing and controversial, and it's generally something new in a lot of states. Maine is another state where there's been some ranked choice voting, but as you can see, when they approved this in Alaska, this was an extremely narrow margin of only about 1%, 50.5 to 45.5. Now, if you want even more background about how this process got approved, as always, Ballotpedia has a full in-depth analysis. They really go over a lot of detail. They go over who supports it, who opposes it, the arguments on each side, the funding, etc. So I recommend looking at that if you want to get some more background. Now, personally, I'm all right with ranked choice voting. However, there are different ways you could do it. I don't prefer a nonpartisan blanket primary. I would still like each party to be able to have a closed or semi-closed primary, then ranked choice voting within each party, and then the winner of those primaries goes on to the general election. Then you do another ranked choice voting in the general. If third parties or independent candidates have met the requirements, then they would also be in that general election. But I'm not a fan of this particular process, or in California or Washington, where you could have two of the same party getting to the general election. Everybody's going to have their own take on it, but that's the format I would prefer for ranked choice voting. It's also going to drag out the process and make it more complicated, but in the general election, it should give third-party candidates more support up front. I think ultimately it's not satisfying at all where somebody wins a primary with only 35% of the vote and then they're the nominee for the general election. I definitely want some sort of a runoff. It's fine if it's instant or if it is later on where you have the top 2 candidates, again campaigning and debating for support. So regardless, in Alaska, what happened after ranked choice voting was implemented? Well, in 2022, that was the first election, and that was a special election to replace longtime Republican incumbent Don Young, who had died. And a lot of you already remember there were actually only 3 candidates in the general election, 1 Democrat and 2 Republicans. There was an intra-party split on the GOP side. The eventual winner was the Democrat, Mary Peltola. She got just under 40%. Sarah Palin was at 31, Nick Begich was at under 28. But after Nick Begich was eliminated, there were enough people that had voted for Begich that either left their ballot blank or ended up supporting the Democrat in the next round. So that did result in a narrow 3-point win for Peltola over Palin in the final total. So that is going to make it controversial. In this specific example, the Democrats benefited from the process, so generally they're going to be more supportive of it. It could easily happen the other way around in a different state, in a different election, where it ends up hurting the Democrats, so it is hard to separate out the politics. And I know the Republicans think the establishment was highly in favor of adding ranked choice voting to protect Lisa Murkowski in the U.S. Senate election. That certainly could be true. I would never underestimate the establishment trying to protect its own, but I can also understand some frustration here where in the general election, 2 Republicans get way over 50% of the vote, yet they end up losing the election. So that was a special election. If we look at what happened in the fall general election, there the same thing kind of happened, but this time Peltola increased her margin and she won by 10 points. So Palin really proved to be unpopular and unlikable. So let's see what's happening in the next election. Of course, Peltola is going to be the incumbent for the Democrats and start out with an advantage. But overall, on a presidential level, this is a moderately red state, so Republicans should theoretically be competitive here. So we do have Nick Begich III running again for his 3rd straight election. This time, Sarah Palin does not look like she's running. That could help Republicans. However, Nancy Dahlstrom, the lieutenant governor of Alaska, she's thrown her hat into the ring. That could again split the Republican vote. She's got the support of Governor Dunleavy behind her, so it could be another mess here for the Republicans in Alaska. There's one poll here from back in November. In the first round, Peltola has 42%, Begich is at 28%, and with no other Democrats in the race, it's again going to be all about how much Republicans are going to split their vote. And the race here is currently rated as tilt or lean D by most of the prediction sites. So with all that said about ranked choice voting in Alaska and the subsequent election results, here is the Ballotpedia page that talks about repealing ranked choice voting, and that should be on the ballot this November. Then it would later go into effect in subsequent elections. So again, there's a lot of information here. I'm sure more is going to come out, as it looks like just recently This met the requirements to get on that ballot. So there's going to be money pouring into this race. There's going to be people coming out on both sides. Again, I'm sure Democrats are going to no doubt defend it here in Alaska. Republicans are going to be against it. That should be an interesting election to follow. If I had to predict right now, I would guess it's not going to pass. If you go down a little bit further, you can take a look at the national map and see if there's ranked choice voting in your state. It's kind of a new thing. Some states use it on a small scale in local elections, but it's the kind of thing you're likely to hear more about in different states as time goes on. Some states are even going in the other direction and trying to ban ranked choice voting. So the table down below sums it all up, but there are going to be two states that do have it on the ballot this November. The first is in Nevada. They could implement top 5 ranked choice voting. So that's something to take a look at in Nevada. You can read about that here. Also in Oregon, there's another ballot measure that would implement ranked choice voting starting in 2028. We'll see what happens. It's the kind of thing where you have different states going in different directions and where you might have different coalitions of support and opposition depending on the state. So that is some background about ranked choice voting, particularly in Alaska. But we do have a poll to get to in this state. It's not often we see anything out of Alaska, but this is from Data for Progress with 1,120 likely voters. Maybe you're not a big fan of Data for Progress. Maybe you don't like the process they used, but they ask about Joe Biden's approval rating. That is at 39%, 61 disapprove. Independents and third parties there are at 42 approve, 58 disapprove. Alaska has a lot of independents, but they did not poll a three-way matchup with Kennedy. But in the head-to-head matchup between Biden and Trump, there Trump is ahead by 12 points with 53 to Biden's 41. Independents there tilt toward Biden 48 to 44. So you could look more at these crosstabs. You could scroll down and get some more questions out of Alaska. But overall, this is a fairly but not super red state. It seems like it has drifted toward the Democrats. They had a huge pickup in that U.S. House seat. But on a presidential level, though, it looks like as of right now, Trump has a clear advantage. Things could change. That margin could get more competitive, or Trump could increase his margin even more. So that's an overview of ranked choice voting and what's happening in the last frontier. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this process with ranked choice voting? It's kind of different in different states. Are you in support of it if there were changes, or are you completely against it no matter what? Do you think it could be repealed in November? And what do you think about that U.S. House election in Alaska? Are the Republicans going to be divided again and potentially blow an opportunity? And could this state at all be competitive for president, or is Trump going to win by 15 or more points? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.